Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Heather Elkington. I train new managers how to become high-performing leaders through social media, through my blog, through coaching, and lots of other different ways. And I'm here with the wonderful Abigail Foster, financial educator, who I am going to ask all my deepest, darkest questions to about investing. So Abby, over the last 10 years, I have gone from broke student, like literally struggling to pay £5 to put in my car for petrol, to building and selling a business, and to now being self-employed. So I have lots of different questions about different parts of my journey. But I'm going to start with broke student Hev, who didn't have £5 to put into her car for petrol.
Yeah.
I did have a job, I just had very little disposable income. Is investing right for someone who is kind of that deep in financial struggle?
Often I would say the earlier you can start, the better. And for instance, with Invest Engine, you can start with as little as £20 a month, which actually can be doable for people on really, really low incomes. It's about creating a habit though. I would say obviously there are priorities. Obviously, if you are essentially broke, you want to look at things like paying off debt, making sure that there's not going to be a massive drain out of your income. But think about small, little and often, and creating habits is a really, really good idea. And like I said, you can invest just £20 a month, small amount, create the habit and automate it to be investing on your behalf.
And then if I was to put £20 in and say I was really good at the habit for like 3 or 4 months, and then I panicked and went to take it out, what would happen there?
The thing to think about is what's going on in the market. Often people think, well, I'm just going to buy low and sell high and I'm going to make a gain, and that's how investing works. And actually, often within 3 months, you might not have made very much of a gain. You have to leave it in the market a lot longer to be seeing bigger results. When you start and when you're starting small, just leave it. Be quite passive with it. Leave it to do its own thing and wait for time in the market for sure.
It's really hard to think about when I'm, so at this point in my life, I'm like 19, 20, 21. It's really hard to even fathom ever being 60, 70 years old and needing that fund that you put your money in. So how can you kind of speak into 19, 20-year-olds who are really at the perfect time to start investing? How can we flip their mindset to start thinking, actually, it will be important to think about life?
So for 19-year-old Heather and 19-year-old Abby, obviously we can both say this, but we wish we'd started earlier, and that happens a lot of the time. And so it's just about starting a really small habit earlier and leaving it for the long term, and try to be tempted not to touch it, but think about it as your future self will thank you.
And I remember thinking back then, every one of my financial goals revolved around saving. Like every single one of them was put as much money away as you possibly can into a current account, or I guess that's the kind of 21st century version of get cash stuffed under the bed. Whereas alternatively, I remember the guys, so we all had this big group of friends, group of girls, group of lads, and the guys would all be talking about investing. They would be talking about trading, and even crypto was just becoming a thing when I was at university. But in my circles, in kind of like the female chat that was happening, we just didn't speak about it. We actually thought the guys were crazy, putting money into places like that. And they had the same level of income as we did. They were just as broke as we were, but they would prioritize it. Like they would make sure they had money to put in those things. Do you see that?
Yes, massively. It's the education, it's the publicity, because so many articles directed at women are about women being savers and us not being very good with our money, and where do you buy the next dress for as cheap as possible. Whereas I think the statistic is like 75% of money articles directed at men are about building wealth and investing and growing their wealth. And actually, if you look at that, it's what we're being fed. And so therefore the narrative is going to be, like you said, a whole next generation of young women that still think that they have to save, effectively cash under the bed style, and a whole generation of boys that are investing because that's what they've been taught. And actually, that doesn't have to be the case at all. Like, we're proving this now. So many women are incredible investors, and actually the stats go in our favor that we are brilliant. And I think it's just about starting really good habits, educating your friends, educating the women around you is really, really important.
And I'm just going to fast forward to 23, 24-year-old me. So I'm a couple of years out of university. I've got a job. I have some level of disposable income. Not lots, but like enough to be able to kind of do nice things at the weekend, go out for a meal every now and again. And I, at that age, actually opted out of my pension because I remember seeing how much money was going into my pension. I think it was probably tiny, like £90 a month. And I opted out because I was like, that money would be so much better with me right now.
Yeah.
So if people are thinking about opting out of their pension, I know what I'd go back and tell my 23-year-old self to do, but what would you say?
I would say you have to have a really good reason, and I mean a really good reason for opting out of your workplace pension, because obviously with auto-enrollment, you are literally leaving money on the table in the sense that if you opt out of your pension, your employer does not have to contribute. It's just fact. They have to contribute a minimum of 3%. You put in 5%, but if you don't put anything in, they don't have to put anything in, and that's it. And actually that's really sad because you're effectively letting them get away with not putting money on the table for you for your future. The only thing I would say, because obviously a lot of young people say, okay, well, I'm going to invest it myself. Fine, but you have to do it. You have to go off and invest that money yourself. Don't opt out of your pension and then do nothing with it, because the danger is when you get into your 30s and actually you haven't done any of the work to invest for your future, that you're just going to constantly playing catch up and have to work for an extra, well, I want to say 10, but it won't, it'll be 20 years to get the same as those that actually just put into their pensions earlier.
So if I was to opt out of my pension and decide that £90 I wanted in my bank account and I was going to invest it myself, what's the difference? Where am I losing out?
So you could possibly, with your workplace pension, be losing out on two things. So one, the tax relief that you get from the government for putting into your pension, because you get taxed on your taxable income, which is your gross income less your pension contributions. And then secondly is a contribution from your employer. So your employer, let's say, puts in the minimum of 3%. If you don't put in your amount, they don't have to put that in either. So that's slightly what you're missing out on. But you know, with your pension, you obviously, if you want to take that money out and invest it yourself, that is your complete right to do so.
And so when you reach retirement age, you go to take that money out. Do you pay tax on that when you draw your pension out?
With a pension, you can take out 25% of whatever's in your pension pot. Because the thing you want to think about, obviously, is if you put into your stocks and shares ISA, you can have access to that at any time. Whereas with private pensions right now, the age is 55, you can start taking out, but it's going to rise to 57 in the next few years. And obviously, we're not near retirement. So by the time we get there, it might be even higher than that. Whereas within your stocks and shares ISA, in theory, you can access that any time. There's no restriction that's going to limit you to only taking out 25% of it tax-free, that kind of thing.
So what's the difference between investing for retirement and investing my money now that, I don't know, maybe I want to touch in 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah, so investing for retirement, you have that age amount. So you can't touch especially your private pension, which is your workplace pension, until you're age 55. That is rising to 57 and probably up by the time we hit retirement. Versus investing in, let's say, a stocks and shares ISA right now, means you can access that at any time. In theory, obviously you want to leave it as long as possible before you take out any money through your investments, but you don't have those restrictions that you do with pensions that say you cannot touch it until you are in retirement years.
If I want to buy a house in 5 years' time, is that money best saved in a current account or put into an ISA that I then pull out in 5 years' time?
It depends, which I know is a really annoying answer, but obviously you can make money within your investments. So putting money in, the ideal would be that in 5 years' time the market has risen and you're getting more money in your investments than you would in a savings account, for instance, with like a 4 or 5% interest rate. But you need to be so careful, and you need to be on like reviewing your amounts that are in there. When do you need to take it out? Because let's say you want to buy in 5 years' time, but do you really need that money a little bit before that? Because obviously buying a house costs money outside of just putting down the deposit. And would it be possible to look at other less risky areas to put that money as well? But for instance, on the flip side, if you had a 10-year goal, then yes, you would definitely want to think about investing, because you've got a lot longer in the market for it to bounce back for you.
Yeah. So my proper investment journey started about 2 years ago, and I have one ISA that's managed by like a wealth management company, another an invest engine, but neither of those I actually manage myself. Do you think that's a better way to get started?
So investing is about building your confidence, and if your confidence is growing through the fact that it's being managed by someone else and you can see those results, great, that's what works for you. But for other people, they might build their confidence through doing it themselves and picking things out, seeing the growth, coming back to it more frequently. That's brilliant for them as well. It's very much a personal decision. Investing is really personal, and actually you should think of it as such. Don't think of it as something that someone else is doing. Think of it as something that you can also take on yourself.
Do you have a recommendation for the percentage of disposable income that we should be putting into an investment account?
Me personally, I split my income in lots of different pots. So for instance, I do allocate a certain amount to my emergency fund pot. I allocate a certain amount to my pension. And then I do allocate a certain amount, kind of similar to all of those, into my investment. But some months, obviously that can be more if I've had like a bonus or an increase in my take-home pay. And some months you have to adjust that just depending on what's going on. So I would say it's a personal kind of circumstance situation, but always have a percent in there. Don't think you're gonna get to the end of the month and put in your investment whatever's left. Try and do it at the beginning, because then obviously it's a habit that you'll build over time.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I have really started prioritizing my investment pot recently. It's definitely been a big change, even just in the last year. And I think seeing a lot of the stats around the one you said earlier about how much longer we have to work if we don't start investing early, and just I would love to retire as early as possible, and I think that is the goal for most people, and that starts now. That starts as early as possible. As soon as you start putting money in, the sooner you can retire, essentially. Is that right?
Yeah, in theory. Obviously, if retirement is your goal, you need to think about when you want to retire and work back. Mm-hmm. Because if you do want to retire earlier than the actual retirement ages, so that 55 currently for workplace private pensions and 66 for state, but both of those are rising, you need to think of where you're putting your money. That means you can have easy access to it, how much you're going to contribute, because what does retirement look like for you? Because for some people, it might look like, I want to just live in the flat that I've always lived in. I'm quite happy to not go out and spend a lot of money. I just want to be relaxed. And for other people, they want their retirement to look just the same as their current lifestyle, which requires an income. And therefore you need to think of how are you building not only your income right now, but your income for future you as well. And is there any ways you can be making passive income, which is like investing, where you put your money in and it can be paying you back over time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my split, I actually don't have that much money in my pension because I stopped paying into it for a good few years. Okay. And then I'm now self-employed and didn't pay into my pension for the first year of being self-employed. But I had 1 year where I worked for, 2 years, where I worked for a big corporate, and they had a really great like pension match. I think they did 4% plus whatever you put in. Okay. So I was like, right, I'm gonna slam as much in as possible. But now, for me, I prioritize my ISA. Mm-hmm. So this is why I'm wondering if I'm doing the right thing, because my pension pot, I'd say, is relatively small for my age and like the salaries that I've been on, but my ISAs are chunky, and that's where I put most of my money, effort, and love into, whereas my pension's just a bit dead at the minute.
With business owners, we all know, obviously those first few years running a business, pension is the last thing you're going to be spending your money on. That's how it feels anyway, because everything always feels like you've got to spend on other areas. So like I said, it depends on how you're feeling. If you're very comfortable with your ISAs building up, you know where they are, what they're doing, what they're going to look like in the future, great. Pension isn't the only route, it just happens to have a lot of tax relief on it. And it also happens to have this kind of matching scheme with employers that you don't get elsewhere. But when you become self-employed, you can set pensions up for yourself. So you can set up a SIP, which is self-invested personal pension, which you can do through your business.
So in the next couple of weeks, I want to start putting into my pension through my business. I'm self-employed. Is it simple to do?
Yes, so you can set up a SIP through Invest Engine, so a self-invested personal pension. It's very similar to setting up an ISA. You just generate an account, you can start putting money in for sure.
So you're saving on corporation tax?
Yes, it is a business expense. Okay. And it is one that all business owners especially should be thinking about, because like we said, often those first few years, you're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking about how you can grow your business, but you must remember to look after your own well-being for your future as well.
And is a SIP self-managed or managed by?
You can have both. You can have self-managed and actively managed by either obviously someone within Invest Engine. But again, it's a personal choice. It's very similar to your stocks and shares ISA. You can invest in what you want to invest in and have real control and autonomy over that.
What about the same advice for a house? Is that an asset or a liability?
So for a house, when it comes to buying, if that's what you want to do, for many people, they see it as an investment, because you can invest in real estate. You can invest in real estate investment trusts, for instance, like trusts that obviously only invest in real estate. And They, in general, rise in value. However, it depends where you live. It depends what you're willing to buy, what you're willing to wait to get that money back, because a lot of young people think that real estate is the surefire way to make money. And 20 years ago, it was. You bought houses and they increased in value even without even doing anything to them. Unfortunately, nowadays that's not the same. And I see a lot of young people get swept up into buying homes when they are in those first few years into their jobs, buy homes, try and sell a few years later, and actually end up losing money through things like the fees you have to pay out, the fact that the house prices haven't risen as much as we would expect them to, or others expect their house prices to rise by, and the market in general. So yeah, investing should be seen as a form of self-care. You know, we put into things that level up us as people. We go on courses, we read the news, we do all these things every day to make ourselves better for the future. And investing is just another part of that, and something that should just become a habit for many people. It's an amount of money that leaves their account, goes into their investment portfolio and builds for future them, and future them obviously thanks them for doing it, because as we've said, there are liabilities of things we spend out on that actually just lose money overnight and can be worth nothing in the next few years, versus obviously putting your money into investments. Really, you should see a slightly different outcome for that, where you're putting money in and seeing growth on that in the future.
I think for me, things changed when I realised that the money I was sinking into clothes to try and impress other people, like makeup, to try and make myself look a certain way, that money would be so much better put into something that was investing in my future and my ability to make choices in the future as to when I wanted to retire.
Yeah, those expenses aren't bad expenses, because like we all know, if we look and feel better, often we can perform better. I know I do. Like, I spend money on clothes and makeup for this exact reason, because I know it will help me level up. But I do see what you mean in the sense of there's this stigma that you should spend in all these other areas, and no one talks about building that wealth. It's kind of coming full circle to what we said at the beginning, in the sense of, like, as women especially, we're not being told to build our wealth, we're just being told where to spend our money. And actually, we should be building it and taking everyone else along with us as well, and reminding them how to build their wealth.
If I have all of this, so I've been investing all this cash into my ISA. Say if I was to then get married, is that now a joint thing with that person I marry?
No, your ISA is an individual savings account. It is individual to you. This is, do you know what, I actually get asked a lot, because obviously when you get married to someone, a lot of things do combine. You can have spousal transfer, lots of things going on. But no, it is an individual savings account. You get 120K per person per year. If you have a child, they get their own 9K in a junior ISA, but it's individual to you. No, you don't have to share that with anyone.
Which could be a really nice, I think, independence to have. It provides such great independence, because even if it's just a small amount that you're putting in, that ISA can be your way out of being able to say no to things, being able to leave things if you need to, because you have your own pot of wealth. And I know people in lots of sticky financial situations who can't leave marriages or struggle to leave houses and living situations because all of their wealth is tied up with their other half. So it could just be a really nice way as well to build something. There
is a stigma that emergency fund pots and savings accounts in general are there for emergencies only. And when people hear the word emergency, they think broken down car, broken fridge. They think of those like quite physical things, but they don't think about, like what you've said, when a relationship breaks down. That's still an emergency. You want out. Or you're in a job that you really cannot stand anymore and you need out. Where is your safety blanket? Well, you have to have put that safety blanket in earlier, and that's where like investing and saving for your future self comes in, because actually you want to be developing that safety blanket. Yes, you might not feel you need it right now, but future you might. And yeah, it's important, like you said, it's individual, it's personal to you.
Gives you choices.
Exactly. That is what wealth gives you, for women specifically, is choice, and gives you the opportunities to build on a life that you actually, like one sort of life to take you in a different direction.